These books are, by the way, if you're not here with us, they're available for free online at the website of the Center for Security Policy, securefreedom.org. We have the privilege in Washington of working with some of the best people in the country on these sorts of issues. And you saw a snippet of him a moment ago. We're now going to roll the tape for Mark Krikorian, the executive director of a terrific organization called the Center for Immigration Studies in Washington. He, too, is one of the go-to guys on these issues of immigration, of border insecurity, of our dysfunctional policies, and not least on the refugee resettlement issue. Let's roll the tape.
Do they reject the Donald Trump's comments on Muslim travel to the United States have generated a lot of controversy, a lot of outrage, some of it justified, but not all of it. There's a real point there. There's a kernel of a point that needs to be addressed. And there's three things we need to keep in mind when thinking about how a realistic approach to Muslim immigration and Muslim travel to the United States could be approached. The first thing to keep in mind is this is not a constitutional issue. The United States can bar anybody it wants for any reason it wants, period. Congress simply has to pass a law saying no left-handed redheads are allowed into the United States, and that's the way it is because there is no right for foreigners to come to the United States. In fact, the president already has the statutory authority to keep out any person or any class of persons. That's what the law says. So this is purely a question of, is it good policy to simply keep all Muslims out of the United States or not? The second point is that the way it's formulated by Mr. Trump is not good policy, certainly not in my opinion, because the issue is not keeping out anyone who identifies as a Muslim or is identified as a Muslim. Rather, the issue is to keep out people who adhere to the political aspects of Islam. If someone prays 5 times a day and fasts during Ramadan, that's none of anybody's business. But someone who supports killing homosexuals, killing adulterers, using the law to punish blasphemers, that sort of thing, the Sharia aspect of Islam rather than the strictly religious parts of it, that we can and should exclude people for. And there are a number of ways we can do it. The simplest first thing to do is to use ideological exclusion. That's a provision, a concept that's been in the law, was in the law for a long time, that a person who isn't actually a member of a totalitarian party, isn't actually a terrorist or using violence, but still expresses support for essentially overthrowing the Constitution or subverting or replacing the Constitution, can be kept out, should be kept out. We changed the law after the Cold War thinking history had ended. We need to reinstitute that idea so that on visa applications and interviews and what have you, we ask some very basic, lowest common denominator types of questions. Do you support freedom of speech for people, even if it insults religious sensibilities? Do you support freedom of religion or no religion or changing religions? And, you know, some people will lie, but we will be setting a marker that says these are things not permitted, that Islamic supremacism has no place in the American constitutional order or American society. And a point I think to make here to further clarify the kind of crude sledgehammer approach that Trump was talking about is that this is more important to do for people who are actually coming to join our society. Immigrants, long-term workers, long-term students. If a businessman from United Arab Emirates is coming to a conference in Houston for 3 days and then goes home, it doesn't really matter whether he favors killing apostates because he's not a member of our society. He comes and he goes. Now, we have to make sure that that happens, and we haven't done a very good job of that. But the issue here is, people coming to live among us, do they reject the basic foundation of our constitutional order or not? And if they don't, I don't care whether they call themselves Muslims, because it doesn't matter. They're not a threat. However, the overall level of immigration of Muslims to the United States and previous immigration, the communities that already exist, many of them made up of children of immigrants, like the husband in the San Bernardino attack, that actually is an issue that we somehow have to deal with. How do we ensure the successful and full Americanization of the roughly 3 million Muslims who are already here? And that will require reductions overall in immigration. We can't just say no people from Muslim countries, because there are lots of non-Muslims, Christians, Jews, etc., from those countries, as well as large numbers of Muslims in countries that are not majority Muslim, India, France, etc. So what we need is an across-the-board reduction in those categories that are disproportionately responsible for large-scale Muslim immigration. That would be, for instance, the visa lottery. We actually have a lottery. We give out 50,000 green cards at random. Chain migration, family chain migration, so that we limit the immigration of relatives to spouses and minor children. It would not have stopped, for instance, the San Bernardino jihad mom, but it would in fact succeed in reducing the constant refreshing of these communities from abroad. Refugee resettlement also needs to be completely rethought so that we help people abroad, enabling us to help more people and keep the security issues offshore. And then finally, foreign students are completely uncapped, uncontrolled, not uncontrolled. There's an attempt at tracking them, but it's not very good. But the numbers are growing very rapidly. It is an important first step for large-scale Middle Eastern immigration to the United States, and it really needs to be rethought and dialed back. None of these solutions is going to be perfect, but the point is that we can, in fact, shrink the problem, make it less serious, and join our immigration policy to other aspects of policy to protect the American people and address this scourge of violent radical Islam that is afflicting not just countries overseas, but communities here in the United States.